Welcome to Talk Purpose and Truth, shifting you into higher consciousness. A show that elevates, uplifts, and encourages listeners to grow, heal, awaken, and evolve. Eden and Kim include bold topics, interviews with inspiring guests, experts, and celebrities, intuitive readings, channeled messages, mental health awareness, and hot topics to expand your awareness. Tune in for unprecedented truth, authenticity, on-purpose discussions, and magic.
Like I always tell people I work with, I learn as much about writing and storytelling working with them as I hope they do working with me. I think I get more out of it. I mean, I really, I always come away different from those books, whether it's Tyrus or the Doobie Brothers or Leif Garrett or whomever. For better or worse, you come away changed because you've experienced this thing with somebody. You've watched them, in some cases, just rip their insides out, getting close to their own truth. And, but you change in a good way. You grow, and it helps set you up for whatever the next writing project's going to be.
Yeah, it sounds like it sounds like you have a mixture of the compound effect of basically like you've done so many interesting things in all different aspects of life. And what happens is like you've put in all that time. So all of a sudden things are attracting and coming to you, like, and mixed with just letting go and allowing, things to manifest.
I think part of it is good. Look, it's like anything. If you do well on behalf of somebody, there'll be word of mouth, that happens. And that's nice when that happens. But yeah, then you get a sense that the universe maybe has a couple plans for you. I always feel like it's incumbent upon me to take those experiences and share them in a way that delivers an experience for other people. It's why I started teaching memoir workshops, because I thought, my God, I work with all these people and I've cycled through all these experiences and watched all these growth patterns and had, hundreds, if not thousands of conversations that have helped me figure out how to get people to let go and write, honestly. So those workshops have become, I do those all the time now. And it's like, they're amazing. They fill up in the blink of an eye. It's people that are there to write. And I love watching people find their voice. I mean, it's like, I have one tonight as we're going to sit down in Newport that I do at the Newport Public Library. And it's the second week and it's about 25 people. And I know I'm going to walk in there tonight and they're all going to be ready. They're going to, they were the assignment from last week. They're going to be ready to get up and read it. They're going to be hungry for more. So everything I'm learning, I'm simply cycling back into those workshops because, why waste the energy? It's too good. It's too valuable to just let me sit around, rethinking what I was able to do with some of these people.
I love it. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So much passion for your purpose, it's really
but if everyone does something that is worth passing along, and I don't care what it is. I mean, everyone's got some craft or some skill that if they think about it, you can do something with it and hand it off to, when I was a kid, I don't think we talked about it last time, but I got to have this mentorship with this really well-known fiction writer named John Cheever, who was a neighbor of ours up in Westchester County. And when I had said I wanted to be a writer as a kid, my dad said, well, you got to have a plan, even fourth grade, right? Wasn't enough that you just wanted to be a writer. It's like you had to have like a path to it. And he said, well, you've got to write John Cheever a note and go put it in his mailbox and ask him advice. So I did. And he wrote back and then he called, and which blew my parents' minds because they were huge John Cheever fans. And to me, it was like, well, that's what happens. You write somebody and they write you back. I didn't get that it was that big a deal. But that mentorship went on, until I was in college, till he died. And that's also stuff that I still impart, because I started thinking about that a few years ago. And it's like, God, I got to be with that guy a lot.
Yeah.
And he told me a lot. So why am I not putting that out? So every memoir workshop, I channel some John Cheever in the room, specific lesson-based attitudes about writing, so you're just shedding these experiences that you've got for people, then hopefully they can take what they want and maybe then they take it somewhere,
Right.
Yeah.
It just sort of keeps evolving and changing a bit as it goes on, but it's something, it still exists.
What a good feeling. I had that the other day. I know this is not about me, but I've been mentoring a couple people in the area of being a medium, and because that's what I do. And both of them for about a year. And the first one, she called me yesterday and told me that she did her first reading for someone.
Hmm.
And it just came full circle
Yeah,
in
amazing.
that moment. And it felt so gratifying that, I could do that for someone. And all I'm doing is just telling them what I know.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. You don't expect anything back on it. You just kind of do it because it feels right. I was
Yeah.
at a function a couple of months ago, and I was waylaid. A woman came over and she said, do you remember me? And she seemed kind of familiar. And she goes, well, my son was on your, like, was a little league coach. My son, Joey, was on your team. I'm like, oh my God, the kids I remember, right? Joey, and she goes, something? She goes, you're not going to believe this, but he called the other day and talked about you. Now, when he was on the team, there were some family issues there. And as a coach, you gravitate toward those. Any kid going through that, you've got to kind of take that into account, and maybe, I don't even know what you do a little something extra. You know what I mean? I don't even know what it is, but you at least create a cushion so that if something rough's going on, you make it a better experience with him.
Yeah.
And this kid was that kid, and he was a great kid as well. And she said, he called and he told me about what you did for him, what that meant to him. I started crying.
Yeah.
At this school. I'm like, you're kidding me. So she gave me his number and I called, and he's just started his own business and stuff. And it's like those things to me, when you do that, like your experience of having I'm getting choked up now. But that's when you really, when the circle completes like that. I mean, that's the best feeling in the world. When you know somebody actually thought about it and acted on it and remembers it fondly. I mean, come on, that's nothing like that.
That's amazing. I love it. So life-changing. It makes me think of, and this wasn't even related to like what I do for a living, but my friend who lost her husband, Sylvia, was telling me the other day, because there's kind of that belief that you lose someone like that, you're supposed to just be a mess for years. And, although she has her moments, she said, she has a lot of days where she feels happy and harmonious and joyful. And she goes, Kim, you were one of the ones that made me realize I could be that. And I go, why? And she goes, a long time ago, you pulled me aside and said, how are you doing? Because she was a caregiver for him for like 14 years he had ALS. And so I would check on her, how are you? And she's like, I'm pretty good. And I said, well, of course you're good, because your nature is being happy. And she was like, so she told me that goes in her head like every day. She's like, it's okay to be happy because my nature is that I'm happy. And even though that's a simple thing, she's like, I wouldn't have really thought about it like that. And your words stuck with me. So my reason for bringing that up with all your stories is for those listening. Sometimes we have a thought about someone and we don't bother saying it, or a compliment or words of inspiration. And so try to act on those things, even if it's someone in line at the supermarket, like say what you're thinking, because you never know how much.
I agree. I totally agree with you. We miss opportunities. And, I think when you talk about affecting people, and obviously for those of us that are parents, that's your first line of influence. Those are the ones that you really sweat over the most. You want to impart everything to them, whether they want it or not.
Yeah.
And it's almost like when they've had enough and had their fill, you almost you look outside of that sometimes, because you realize that the kids need their own space. You give them what you got, and then they've got to go make up their own stuff. You can't. And I would err on the side of overwhelming. Just, it's like I'm one of them. I'm one of those really. When you adore your kids, it's like you just want to always be on top of everything. But you gotta. I'm learning. I haven't learned, but I'm learning slowly and my kids are 29 and 26. They're adults, and they're thriving, and they're doing amazingly well and all that. But I just love hearing about their takes on the world and their experiences, and then maybe, throwing mine on top of it. It's just something about enjoying watching your kids grow. I don't think you ever give up on wanting to help shape, their attitude, or at least not shape their attitude, but at least let them know mistakes you made, or things that help them with down the line, things to
totally.
So, but it's like you say, Kim, you really have to, I think at this stage of the game, world's a lot more serious now. It feels that way. than it was a few years ago. So yeah, any opportunity you've got to, I'm always conscious of like calling out something good, like, it's in a restaurant or whatever, right? But whenever you say, hey, what's your name? When somebody thinks it's going to be the opposite of that, and you see a look on their face like, oh my, like, well, what's this person going to do? And you say, I want to go to your manager and say, you're like amazing. Like whatever they're doing, they got to make you happy because you're making this place better. I've always tried. Yeah, to me, I look for those things rather than, my soup is cold. It's like, I've never gotten that. I wasn't raised around that. It was always about looking for a positive thing to call out. The other things are going to happen. I mean, that's just life. Nothing's perfect. Sometimes things other ways, or someone's having a bad day or whatever, but you can't, the people that, the opposite that ride everything. Yeah. Always looking, they're called Karens today, but that thing has existed for a long time, of people that are always looking for what's wrong. Go to the next level. Let's escalate everything, to some degree. And it's like, have you never made a mistake? Have you never, taking your eye off the ball? I mean, come on, there's different ways to accomplish a lesson like that rather than ratting someone out to someone's manager.
Yeah. I feel bad for women named Karen now.
Oh, God, isn't it crazy that Karen's become this pejorative? I do too. I mean, it's like, there's always the people that pay the price of history. My younger sister's birthday is September 11th. It's like, like there's always something that happens in life where not to compare, obviously not a level of Karen, but you know what I mean? Like where something changes on a day and it just becomes part of your own history at that point, forever, or at least for a number of years. And it's such a weird cultural thing that happens. I had a neighbor at a Halloween block party a couple weeks ago. She was dressed as a Karen, big sign that said, "Can I see your manager?" She had the hairdo, the whole bit. And it's like, it's funny. It was funny because I think we all secretly, know those people and probably don't think highly of those people. It is a kind of funny archetype, but they've always existed. It's not like this, that COVID or anything created. Maybe it accentuated certain parts of it, but there've always been people that, take things to that level and escalate every little thing. And I mean, you make sense of the last few years of his life. So I'm kidding me. So I started going over to the house. They lived in Fullerton, very modest house. They had lived in for 60 some odd years, same house, never moved.
Wow.
Which was a story in itself. And so I got very close, but became like part of the family, until he died. And we had been planning a museum exhibit pre-COVID with Tommy and his wife. They've both since passed, but the exhibit opened a couple of weeks ago. It's really nice. There's all kinds of artifacts. It's part of a touring baseball Hall of Fame exhibit that's also there as well. So it's really, if you like baseball,
wow. I'm taking my dad.
Oh, yeah, I was thinking of my dad too.
No,
that's
wonderful.
a good Father's Day thing to do.
Yeah, but
Father's Day.
Do it sooner, because when does it end?
Yeah, it ends in Christmas time.
Yeah,
so we won't quite. But what might, I'm continuing to work on the Lasorda story, not as a book, but as a docu-series. Laura and I put our heads together and came up with this idea to look at it as a TV project, because I had accumulated so many materials. I mean, hundreds of hours of interviews and video and home movie, everything, So we got access to this family treasure trove of stuff. So that's what we're going to do. We're in the process of that now, of presenting
Oh,
it.
cool.
And again, Tommy Lasorda was an incredible guy. I mean, again, he transcended baseball in a lot of ways. It wasn't just about baseball. He was a world figure. He was somebody that just epitomized passion, enthusiasm, hard work, love of God, country, baseball, everything, faith, God, everything. And he just, I'm a big baseball fan. And to sit at a table with him each week, I'm not impressed. I've been with a lot of people and written and all these sorts of things. Celebrity doesn't impress you. And this wasn't about that, but I would sitting at the table have to remind myself, this is this kind of nice little guy. This is Tommy Lasorda. This is that guy that you watch for the last 30, 40 years, as a baseball fan, and all those different situations. This is him. He's right here. You can, and that was kind of weird for a while. What would happen is I'd get very comfortable at the house and nothing fazed me, but then we'd go to a ball game together. And when you go to a game, then it's like when you're in that bubble and everything, the attention comes at you, then it reminds you that this is not just some guy. This is somebody that people spent a lot of time thinking about, and projecting stuff at. And he's just was such a part of the fabric of everybody's memories, baseball or otherwise. So it was an experience. It really was. The exhibit is nice, but I think the story we're going to tell soon on television will be even nicer, because it's going to have a lot of layers and a lot of different things that people haven't seen yet.
Are you allowed to share?
There was one story I learned through the process that was really incredible. When the first day I went to the house, this would have been, I think, like 2008, 17 or 18. And there was this old phone in the kitchen wall. I mean, old, like not a rotary, but like an old, like orange plastic push button, like a 1970s phone. And I said to Tommy's wife, I said, Joe, like, why do you have that phone there? She goes, oh, well, we'll never take that phone down. It has too many memories. I said, well, tell me about it. Like, what is it about the phone? And she says, well, when Dad, which is what she called Tommy, when Dad would come home after particularly like a rough loss, he would be very agitated. You couldn't really talk to him, but he would lie in bed waiting for that phone to ring sometime around 2 or 3 in the morning, like late. And he'd always jump up and go answer it. He'd wait for that call, and I'd hear him on the phone. He'd be arguing with the other guy. But then the argument would sort of graduate into like, they'd be laughing, and then hang up. And before it go on, we'd be back in bed. And I said, okay, who was calling? She said, well, it was Frank Sinatra.
Oh.
She said they'd become such good friends. And Frank would have like an attitude about what he should have done as manager, and would call and argue with him. And so this I adore Frank Sinatra. So just knowing like you're in a house and that's the phone, and this is the, you know what I mean? All of a sudden you're kind of once removed.
Yeah.
And then I learned something else that absolutely blew my mind. When Tommy first was becoming the manager in 1977, I guess, Sinatra was thrilled because it was an Italian American, becoming, I think Tommy may have been the first Italian American manager. I'm not sure about that, but he was one of the first, if not the. So Lasorda this is thrilling news for Sinatra. So Frank says to him, look, when you start first game out, I'm going to come, do something I've never done. I'm going to sing the national anthem at the Dodger game. And Tommy says, and he showed up. It was a rain. And he did it. So they became good friends after that. That first season, Sinatra was doing a residency in Vegas, and it might have been, I don't know, maybe Stephen Williams. Anyway, he said, Tommy, I want to fly you and Joe out on my plane. I want to introduce you to my audience one night at a show. It's off season. He says, I want people to get a sense of you, my audience. Tommy's like, okay, of course, Frank Sinatra, he adores Sinatra, Italian, right? So it's a Saturday, I believe it's Saturday, but wherever the day is, the day before, Tommy gets a call from a local guy. I think it was a hardware store owner in Fullerton, who says, Tommy, I have a bit of an emergency. My business is killing me. If you could do an in-store tomorrow, it would really help. I could really use your help. Lasorda says, yeah, it was Sinatra sending his plane. All right. He calls Sinatra and says, Frank, Joe and I are going to fly separately. I got to help this guy out. He's a local. He needs me. We'll be at the show, but we'll get ourselves there. Well, that's the night that Sinatra's plane leaving from Palm Springs crashed with Sinatra's mother on board. If you didn't know that, like that was the flight, you know? So you think about that. Had they been on that plane, you know what I mean? Like, just, this is before his career as a manager even really started.
Did his mom die?
Sinatra's mother died in that crash. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And,
Whoa.
So, you know, Lasorda's life has all these fate destiny moments where things just change like instantly.
Yeah.
And that's one of them. So I think when we get to unpacking the full story, it's going to be really interesting for people, whether you like baseball or not. It's really not going to be about baseball per se. I mean, it's baseball, but the next level of it is really just about the incongruency of this blue collar steel town, you know, rough kid becoming like the king of Hollywood, you know, and how that happens and what he did for people and his philanthropy and his motivation and his all of the things he taught people. So I'm very excited about that.
Is this going to be is this going to be a documentary?
It's structured now as a docu-series. So you imagine like an Apple TV or Netflix thing for 3 or 4 episodes.
Okay.
That's the current structure.
And it's interesting he chose to live in Fullerton, like so far from.
Well, when he moved to Fullerton, he wasn't, you know, working, you know, he was a scout, so he could really be anywhere. They loved the community. They never left the community, lived in the same house for 60 years.
Wow. That's cool.
Wow, you just made it fascinating. Like someone who's not a fan probably would want to watch it after.
Well, I gotta tell you, you're the one. Honestly, baseball fans are what they call, I hate the term, but it's accurate, low-hanging fruit. It's like baseball fans will watch it, but to me, you're the audience. It should appeal to somebody that doesn't care about baseball.
Yeah.
It's really not about baseball. It's about life, and it's about this 65-year marriage of his, and it's about you know, coming to grips with certain things in his personal life. I mean, it really is. It's about life beyond it.
And it's good to hear this just from my perspective, because my dad, when I was growing up, he worked with the Dodgers, and he had some run-ins with Tommy that were negative, very negative. So that's all I know of Tommy. So to hear that there's a good side that's, you know, loving.
Look, Tommy, you know, Tommy could be an aggressive, abrasive. Again, it's all part of the passion play. You know what I mean? You got to take the rough with the smooth. You can't have that level of passion, that temperature running hot, and not have some moments where you break a few eggs. You know what I mean? It's all about that big omelet. You're going to break some eggs. That's just the way life is. And I think thankfully, I mean, look, in putting his story together when he was around, I talked to lots of people, from players to celebrities to fans. And the guy that struck me, one of the guys that struck me the most, is the guy who locks up the gate at Dodger Stadium every night. Like, he can't leave till the last guy's out. And he's been there for years. And he told me, he says, you know, when Tommy was still managing, he said he was the last one to leave. He said, because he would sit there and answer fan mail, like till 2 in the morning. He'd write people back. He would type people back. That was important to me because I couldn't leave. Because Tommy knew I couldn't leave. So what Tommy would do, he would go in the players' catering room. He goes, and there wasn't one night he didn't come out to the gate with a box of food for my family to say, you know, I kept you here. Let me feed your family. He goes, that was our routine. Tommy would never forget to, you know, and if you knew it was his kid's birthday, there'd be a cake. He was very in tune with people and what their needs were and what, you know, just things like that. So, you know, when I used to be with him at a game, we had to get somewhere else in the stadium. You'd have to build in a half hour just to go one section over, because he would stop anybody who recognized him, which was everybody. He would stop, and we'd say, Tommy, we got to, no, this kid got, and he would have that moment. Kids, and there wasn't a kid he spoke to or signed an autograph for that didn't hear the words, "You love your parents, you love your country, you promise me you're going to love you promise." He used every little moment as a little teaching, motivation, no matter how old the kid was. He would always put that out there, to at the exhibit in Fullerton, there's a letter on the wall. It's a densely single space type letter from, I think, 1966. So way before he's a manager, he's a coach in Utah. And he had a kid wrote him, and he wrote this kid this letter, right? And Tommy's a guy who worked with him at that time, was at the exhibit at the night of the opening. And I said, like, this letter, did he have like a secretary? Like, I remember typewriters, and this is like old school, He goes, no, Tommy traveled with a typewriter. And every night he would type out his game notes and he would type responses to fans. So it's like, he didn't just start doing that. This is just his being. It was all about connection, reaction, responding. It really was. I mean, again, the more I learn about him today, the more impressed I am by his capacity for his memory, his knowledge, his levels of enthusiasm. I mean, he really, everything was always at pitch level. Everything was always up here. Everything he did, was always a little over the top. And I think that's what made him bigger than life.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna go to the museum, and it's not too far from me. So
Yeah, no, it's something worth making a trip.
yeah.
So you have a pop culture book called Hello,
It's Me.
Hello, It's Me, where you talk about the pop culture fads.
Yeah.
What are some of those, the ones that are the most memorable for you over the past 50 years? That's a lot.
Well, I mean, in the 70s, which is my sort of I think many of our sweet spots are like adolescent, coming of age, the first time we experience things, the first beer, a first date, whatever it is, that period of time we're very dialed into. So, I mean, in the 70s for me, the trends were, it was, pet rocks, puka shell necklaces, mood rings, all those things that were kind of, I don't know, they were provocative in a way. Mood rings in particular to me were amazing because we all kind of, I don't know, there was something simple and interesting about those. Certain clothing styles from back then, earth shoes, all those things that happened in the 70s were really, you could experiment with anything, nothing was off limits. And I liked that. I liked the openness of the era. I liked the innocence of the era. I think we've shut down a lot of that today, which is unfortunate. And I just, I loved the Partridge Family, the Brady Bunch, all of those kinds of trends as an early kid to me were totally magical. So to me, the 70s will always be a very fond decade. It was also, there was a lot of, you had things like the Vietnam War still going on. You had Watergate, you had Patty Hearst, you had all these other things going on, these kind of darker aspects, Son of Sam, that were strange and uncomfortable, but that also made the decade, I think, interesting as well. Great moments in sports, and the music, I think, undeniably holds up in ways that normal music doesn't. I think more than any other decade, music from the 70s still resonates as much as anything does on the same level. So I won't live in the past. I don't believe in that, but I do think it's fun to go back and re-celebrate things that, that were special to you growing up. I like writing about those things. And I like thinking about those things.
Yeah. And I think what's kind of cool is now it seems like all the different eras, we can bring back elements and wear them or use them or
fashion.
My kids are only 10 and 16, and my 16-year-old, you would think she's a kid from the 60s and 70s by the way she dresses and what she's
my daughter's the same way. I know, it's amazing.
Yeah, you would never even know. So it's kind of cool. They get to pull from all those different areas,
and we still have mood rings today.
Yeah. We just had one on our trip.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, so again, I love, I don't want to live in the past, but I do like revisiting that time period and just thinking about what it did for me. And when I wrote the book with Leif Garrett, that was a kind of a fun experience because, talk about living through the 70s. He was a pop culture icon. So that was an interesting chance to, his perspective was unique, certainly, unlike anybody's except for probably Sean and David Cassidy. And that was a good trip back as well to relive that with him. It was not easy, but it was still I'm very proud of that book.
How did that book do?
It did well. I mean, there's an audience, that still follows Leif, but I think people from the 70s liked it. Chance, even if you're not, look, I wasn't a Leif Garrett fan. I was a Sex Pistols fan at that time, but Rolling Stones fan. But I appreciate it. I was curious about how a Leif Garrett happened. Like, what's the process whereby someone's plucked and anointed and becomes the heartthrob like that? You know what I mean?
So different than now, because it starts with TikTok or something on social media.
Totally.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to Talk Purpose and Truth podcast. Find out more at talkpurposeandtruth.com. And follow us at Talk Purpose Truth on Instagram and Facebook.